Well, the White House announcing today they've reached their goal of resettling 10,000 Syrian refugees. The administration was quick to assure critics that meeting the target did not come at the cost of refugees' screening process. President Obama's goal was met nearly 1 month earlier than expected, and the resettling of the Syrian refugees is far from over. The number 10,000 was declared, quote, a floor, not a ceiling. Joining me now, Fox News national security analyst KT McFarland. And KT, I remember, I believe it was State Department that assured us that the vetting of refugees it's the hardest way to get into this country because it takes a year and a half, very thorough vetting, long time. It hasn't even been a year since we started this process. How could they have gone through this big, long vetting?
Well, you know, here's the problem. Where's their credibility? This is the same State Department that said, no, we're not paying ransom for hostages, or the Iran nuke deal is going to be just fine. Trust us, trust us, trust us. And so I think they start out with not a lot of credibility. But even put that aside, look at what the FBI director said. When asked, what about the Syrian refugees, can we vet them? And he said, well, to the extent that we have access to the databases in those countries, yeah, we can vet them. But the problem is we don't necessarily have access. What happens to the chief of police in a controlled area, an area now controlled by ISIS? You know, you're not going to call that guy on the phone and say, tell me about Ahmed, because you don't have access to him. Sure. You don't have access to those databases, or they've been destroyed. But I would even add a further thing. If we want to be humane, why don't we leave them in the area, leave them in the region, build places for them, housing, schools, hospitals, leave them someplace where they share the culture, they have the same language, and then if their lands are reclaimed and given back to them, they can move right back in.
I'm with you. Could you imagine being picked up from the United States of America and dropped in the Syrian desert and said, there you go.
Here, yeah, have fun.
You have
Get a job.
Like you said, no language, you have no contacts, you have no way to make a living, you have nothing. So tell me about this Canadian story. There's a bunch of Canadian ISIS members, maybe? What's going on?
Well, here's what's happened. So the Canadian government has warned its people to say, we think maybe about 180 Canadians have left Canada, gone to the Middle East, trained with ISIS, and as many as half of them, 60, 70, 80 of them are back in Canada, so watch out. Well, that's pretty reassuring, isn't it? To know that you have in your midst people who would be willing and probably trained to take out terrorist attacks.
How good is Canada at doing this, keeping track?
Well, how good are any of us? I mean, I think what's happened is that ISIS has opened a second front in Europe. As we've seen, there's a terrorist attack somewhere in Europe really once or twice a week, and I think they've now started moving into the next fertile territory, which is North America. So we know there are ISIS cells or ISIS are being watched in all 50 states. Again, the FBI director has said that, and now you have the Canadian government to say we have to worry about Canada too. Look, radical Islam is spreading. And it may not be an invasion of thousands and thousands and thousands of troops.
You don't need thousands.
But you don't need it anymore in an era of cyber warfare.
Well, there was a terrorist that tried to get through Port Angeles, Washington, from Canada, and a little tiny customs location, and a customs officer there, she thought something was up. He was on his way to bomb LAX.
That's right.
So Canada has at least, you know, it's a long border, but they caught one, but they got to get you every one of them.
Well, but here's the other thing. That happened in the year, I think it was in 2000, 2001. What's happened since then? Political correctness has infected us all, whether it's in Canada, whether it's in the United States, whether it's in Europe. So how likely is someone who sees something going to say something for fear they'll be criticized for being a bigot, a racist, or someone who doesn't sympathize with terrorists?
And I told the audience on Friday, we were doing the story about the Iranian Navy boats that were harassing U.S. military Navy boats. And I thought of you because you were during the Reagan administration. Ronald Reagan did not play around.
No.
And everybody's talking about politically correct. Don't shoot at those guys. Don't shoot at them. Just be nice to them and Ronald Reagan sunk a bunch of them and said, don't mess with us ever again.
Yeah, they were laying mines in the Strait of Hormuz, and they said they weren't doing it. So Reagan just blew them up, blew up the ships that were laying the mines, and then reflagged other ships that had Kuwaiti flags on them. We put American flags on them and said, you want to mess with us? You're taking on the United States Navy. Now what are we doing? We're apologizing. We're making excuses for ourselves.
What a difference. What a difference a few decades make. All right.
And a leader.
Yes.
That helped.
We had a leader.
We had a leader then. I'm looking around for the next Ronald
I
Reagan.
am too, KT. Thank you so much.
Thanks,
Good to
Tom.
see you.
Thank you.